Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming out on such a dreary night. It is the first day of fall, though, right? So you should expect this, right? Glad you're here, and glad for all of you who are online watching, because I know especially on a night like this, there will be those people online watching. So we appreciate all of you joining in the conversation. So tonight, even though we had to postpone a couple of times for a variety of reasons, this is the third in a four-part series, the third in this conversation about racial equality. So if you got your emails about this event, you may have also noticed that the next one, which is the final one, will be on Sunday afternoon. And Joel Wong will lead that. It'll be a conversation, even more than before. And Joel's going to join me up here at the end as well for questions and conversation as a panel. So let me introduce to you my friend Curtis Whitaker. Isn't that a great last name? I mean, come on, really? Yeah. The only difference between our last names is he spells it with two T's and I spell it with one T. Everything else is the same. There's a lot of derivations of Whitaker out there, and we demonstrate to them. But Curtis and I got to know each other more than a year ago now, maybe going closer to 2 years. We got to know each other through Creation Care Partners when we started talking about issues of environmental concern and what Christians' understanding of that was and what we could do about it. And I heard about Curtis, and I heard about some of the amazing things he was doing at a church in Gary, Indiana. I'm not going to steal his story, but I do want to tell you this. Curtis has got a vision that's way bigger than him. It's kind of a God-like vision. He has an idea about Gary, Indiana, and what God can accomplish there if people just follow God's lead. And you'll hear that story tonight. But one of the things that Curtis has been involved in the community that he grew up in, he's been involved in what I'll call, you probably call it something else, Curtis, micro-farming. Sections of the city, and most of the city of Gary is blighted. Urban flight is everywhere. Houses, as he'll tell you, are abandoned all over the place. And he's moved in close to his church and started to do farming in these vacant lots. And he's buying up property to expand that. And people in the community are taking notice, and it's really making a change. So Curtis has got a lot of things he's been doing. But probably the best thing about Curtis is he's a graduate of IU. So, I mean, how about that? Yeah. 1995, graduated from the Kelley Business School with a focus in accounting and became a CPA and spent some time in Chicago doing that before God put a hook in his jaw and called him back to Gary. And he'll tell you that story, but it is just an honor to introduce you to Curtis Whitaker. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Bob. You have an amazing pastor. Let's give it up for your pastor. He's an amazing. And that last name doesn't hurt. So we're brothers from that perspective. But thank you, CCC. Can I tell you CCC? 3C, Triple C, Christ Community Church. Thank you for having me here with you tonight. To join in with this amazing series on racial equality. I just think it's an awesome thing to do, and I commend you for your bravery in looking behind the scene to explore racial equality. So give yourselves a hand for that. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. As Pastor Bob mentioned, my name is Curtis Whitaker. I am from Gary, Indiana. I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana. Some context, 5% African American community. All right, so that's the community from which I come. I grew up. So if my dad was here, my dad would tell you. People always ask, how many kids you got? He always says 12. So it's 8 of us. My dad always says 12. So we met one, So everybody remember the story, the song "Papa Was a Rolling Stone"? Anybody? Okay. So I know of 9 of us. So I'm the third oldest out of 9 children. 8 of us grew up together, and I grew up since 6 years old. I've been working. But my dad was an entrepreneur. My mom stayed home and was a housewife. And they sent us to school at Holy Trinity. So, although my dad has a 6th grade education, my mom graduated from high school. My dad believed in the value of education, and my dad always worked. So since 6 years old, I was doing something, whether it was jumping in garbage cans to pull out aluminum cans so that we can recycle them. My dad is a recycler. He had a muffler route. He had this uncanny way my dad does of just meeting people. I don't have that gift, but my dad never met a stranger. And so since 6, I've been working, whether it's, like I said, jumping in and out of garbage cans, getting aluminum cans, or my dad had about 100 customers. I don't know how he did it, but he had about 100 customers that I would travel when I was able to drive 15, 16, got a license driving throughout from Michigan, Indiana, Illinois. Just amazing. And the beauty of this is not very many of them were African American. Most of them were of some other nationality, whether it's Greek. So every time we go somewhere, they'd say, "These are my brothers," and I didn't understand what he was talking about. But they made sure that whatever scrap they had available, others would come and try to get it. They would keep it for my dad. And so he taught me the value of work and work ethic and what it means to work, and the value of education. And so I graduated from a school called Horseman High School in Gary. I came to Indiana University in 1990. Now, context, Gary, 95% African American black people. I come to IU and I get shocked because it's totally different. Yeah, and I'm scared of this. I'll get up because I don't see very many people. Like on IU's campus, you'll see, you'll have classes with folks. I was in a class my first semester here, 300 people in a class, and I saw maybe one other person that looked like me. And so you try to find folks and then identify with them, and then you try to get into the life of the black folks on the campus. But do I want to go back home? And I'm like, I don't want to go back home, because if I go back home, then that means one of the reasons I wanted to go to school is because I didn't want I was dirty growing up all the time. I was like, I want to do anything else but walk around with dirty hands and dirty clothes on all day. And so that was my motivation to do something different. Came to IU, again, just like scared as I'll get up, because now I understand what a minority is in a majority community. And never having to deal with that, to having to now deal with that was really hard for me. And so I dealt with it just by finding friends, not understanding, you can make relationships with other people. But at 18, 19, I really didn't get it. I was here in Bloomington, like I said, 5 years, made some relationships, graduated from Kelley School of Business with an accounting degree, and went to work for Arthur Andersen. At the time was the largest CPA firm in the world. And I get to Arthur Andersen, and I get the same experience. There aren't very many people at Arthur Andersen that look like me. And I'm in Chicago, working in Chicago, and partner. So the context for me, I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college. So my 2 brothers above me. So I have no knowledge. I got to Indiana University. I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. But then I figured out I couldn't stand blood. And so blood makes me queasy. And so I couldn't do that. And so I thought I'd be an educator, a math teacher, because I just loved numbers in school. So I said, let me go to education, School of Education, math. And the professor in math, the dean in the math program told me, math isn't for you. You're not very good at it, and you need to decide to do something different. I laughed about it, but after I thought about it, because now I'm a CPA, I have my own CPA firm, although he sort of encouraged me, really discouraged me from. He was like, you need to go down to the center and figure out what you're good at. Well, I did that because I didn't know any better, and it said, you ought to be in the military. So if I would have taken his advice and I would have followed what they had told me, that, and I knew why it said I need to be in the military, because my dad, although he wasn't in the military, I felt like I was in the military growing up. That's how he raised us. And so I was like, I already knew what that was, psychological, whatever they did I already knew it was going to come out, because that's how I was raised. So, so those were some of the experiences, and I get to Arthur Andersen, and it's the same thing. I don't see anybody that looks like me, and I don't know how to handle it. Same thing, they have a group of African Americans that all work together. But even there, I had experience. Like, one of my experiences was I'm a first year, second year staff person. If you know public accounting, you know it's staff. And then there's a senior, and then there's managers, senior managers, partners. So I'm a staff person. You do all the grunt work. And there's a senior who's Caucasian, and it was some project he gave me to do, and it was really to test what I knew and to test. And little did I know, behind the scenes, they're making fun of me. Because it was like this roaming $1 that you, I know how to figure it out now, but back then it was like this big puzzle. And then another experience I had, my first project out of Arthur Andersen after leaving training was in Evansville, Indiana, and I did the best job. In fact, the partner, Dick DeClean was his name. Dick would just, Ray Whitaker, you were the one, you did this on this project. I didn't even know what I did. I did something by accident, and it was right. And he raved about it, and I just took credit for it. I just kept my mouth shut. But the senior on the job rated me low. Your rating, so you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is the highest rating you can get. He rated me a 3. I didn't realize it at the time until I had my review at the end of the year. And I'm like, well, why in the world was I rated a 3? Because your rating then affects your pay and your increase and all of that. And I found out about it, and I went and asked him, man, like the partner said, like, I should have gotten a 5 on this. Why did you give me a 3? Oh, well, it was your first project. And I'm just like, that's not right. That's not fair. And I didn't have anybody I could really, vent to or go share information with. He just took it. And then I became a senior, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to treat people that way. If you deserve a 5, you should get a 5. If you deserve a 3, you should get a 3. But you shouldn't do. And when I became a senior, my third year, all the partners was like, man, you're really good. And so I guess I made up when I became a senior, because I did some really good stuff. I just love to learn, but I knew, again, because there weren't any partners that were African American that I knew of in Chicago. There was one partner in Detroit, but at that large firm, you never see him, never really talk to him. And so I knew, because my dad was in business, I knew one day I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to own my own business and do my own thing. So I said, I'm going to learn as much as I can while I'm here. I'm just going to learn. Whatever they throw at me, I'm just going to do it. And, we have this thing that just learn, because that's something nobody can take away from you if you learn it. So I was like a sponge. So I left Arthur Andersen, and here is why I left. So because I wanted to open my own business, I started out in the audit field. And I spent 3 years in the audit field. And the fourth year, I said, I want to go to tax because I want to learn how to do, I want to be well-rounded when I leave and I start my own business, do my own thing. And they were like, my partners didn't want me to go from audit, so they sort of discouraged me. I said, nah, I made up my mind. I want to go down to the tax group. And this is where I want to go. I want to go into private wealth management in tax. And they wouldn't let me go to private wealth management. They sent me down to some other group. And then about 2 months later, another young man ended up in private wealth management. Probably wasn't even too much, but he wasn't African American. And so I didn't raise any sand. I started to. I was like, you know what? That is so unfair. And so I decided, I don't like where I am here in this spot, but let me just leave. And so I left. I went to work at BP for a minute, and that was really great working at BP. But then I decided to go back to school, and I said, you know what, however old I was back then, I'm still young enough that I can start my business, right? And, I can always come back to corporate America. That's something, and just been successful. Halfway through the program at CTS, life happened, and so I had to stop going to school and really didn't have anything, so I really just 18 hours a day, I was just grinding, as we call it, just trying to figure out, get my business moving. I had a mortgage at that time of $2,500 a month. I was living in Chicago, and God just made a way for me. God just made a way. And so I stayed in Chicago from like 98 to probably 2000, right before the market crashed, the housing bubble. If you all remember the housing bubble, I stayed there, and then I got this call from God to go back home to Gary. And it's interesting because when we came back from dinner, I was looking at the grief counseling that's happening, and I went back to talk to Gretchen is her name, Gretchen Wilson. Went back and talked to Gretchen, and a lady comes in, and then we tell her where I'm from. She said, "Oh, poor thing," about Gary, and that's usually so. And then I told her where I was born and raised there, and then she started to apologize. And I said, no, don't apologize, because when God told me to go back to Gary, I said the same thing. God, what are you doing to me? Sending me back to Gary. I'm living in Chicago in one of the nice neighborhoods, 5 minutes from the White Sox and 20 minutes from the Cubs. And we go to the Bulls games all the time. And I'm like, God, are you seriously calling me to go back to Gary? And he said yes. So it was about Christmas, and my wife and I, we moved. Our place sold really quick. We didn't have a place, sort of like your pastor right now. Although we didn't move into a barn, we moved into a hotel. So we stayed in a hotel for like 6 months. Just on this call from God to go back home. And so went back home. God doesn't, oftentimes he'll call you somewhere, and as I say, it's like if you're filling out, a credit card or, a car, and all that little fine print, you never really read, or you never really see. That's what God did. So just go home and didn't give any other instructions. It since has come. That's the purpose and the reason why I am back at home. But I got the call to go back home, went back home, and the first thing I did, because I'm an entrepreneur, I'm trying to get business from other young entrepreneurs at the time. So I started this group called the Gary Young Professionals. And I started it with some intentionality, just so that we could network together. Those of us in Gary could network together. We could help the next generation of leaders who may be struggling like we're struggling. And I sat on a number of boards at the time. United Way, I chaired the United Way's board. I was on about 3 or 4 regional boards and committees and boards in Chicago. And the ones in Indiana, unfortunately, were always, every board I went to, it was the same people and all white men. And so I invited them. I said, hey, guys, you guys need to come to my event. You know, you asked what I do. I want to show you what I do. Come and experience my life with the Gary Young Professionals, because oftentimes they would tell me, Curtis, you're an anomaly. I said, I'm not an anomaly. No, there are people who look like me. You just don't hang out in the circles that I hang out in, but I'm going to invite you to circles I hang out in. Then you can see that's not the truth. That's not the case, that there are tons of talented people who look like me, who want to give back, who want to serve on boards. You just don't know them, and they just don't know you. And that may be all that it is. And so I want to introduce you to them so that we can get more diversity on the boards that we have, so that and that you can see that there are more people who are smart and intelligent, way smarter than I am, who can serve on some of these boards and make some decisions that impact all of us, either in the city or in the region. And they never came, but that's another story. They never came. So we continue to do the work, continue the Gary Young Professionals. I'm back. I never left my church, so I'm in Gary. The church I grew up in is the church I now pastor, in the community that I grew up in. I don't live in that community anymore, although I still live in Gary. But my heart and passion is for the community. So more context of the community that I'm in. So I get a call from my pastor saying he's going to retire and that I would be pastor. So I became pastor. Christmas will be 10 years that I've been pastoring a church that I've been in since I was 12. So almost 38 years I've been in the church. And so I get to the church, become pastor of the church, and God just gives me this crazy vision on revitalizing the community and the neighborhood. So some context, as Pastor Bob was sharing with you, on the church I pastor, how many occupied houses do you think exist on the church, on the block that I pastor? Anybody? 2? Anybody else? 5, 0, 2. Anybody else? One more. 5. Say that again. 40%. Somebody said 10. It's between 0 and 2. 1. One occupied house, literally. All the other houses are abandoned. It wasn't like that when I grew up. Every house had people in it. There were apartment buildings. It was just overflowing. And then the block next to us, same thing. There's another block right behind that. There are no, somebody says 0 is 0. There's an apartment building, another block, 1 or 2. And so all around us is blight. And God gave us just this vision for how we recreate our community and our neighborhood. And so the first thing I did is I went to the other pastors in our community. So we're, by tradition, we're a Baptist church. So our legal name is Progressive Missionary Baptist Church. Our pastor changed the name to Progressive Community Church because we're community-minded and community-focused, and just thought that some people would hear the word Baptist and wouldn't come through our door just because of that, and not understanding that, we just love to worship God in spirit and in truth. And so we go by Progressive Community Church, but there's a Catholic church 2 blocks from us. There's a Methodist church 4 blocks from us. There's an Apostolic church 5 blocks from us, and another 2 blocks over is a non-pastors. 2 of them are white, 3 of them, 1 female and a male African-American, and said, look, God gave me this vision, and here's what he said. He said, until people don't care about, people who don't go to church don't care about, if I'm Baptist and you're Catholic and you're Methodist, they don't even know what that means. The one thing they do know is if we're working together. And up to that point, we hadn't worked together on anything. And here we are. And so we said, if we can all just say Jesus is Lord and move forward from there, can we all agree to that? And everybody agreed to it. And we moved forward. And we didn't know each other. Although I've been in the neighborhood almost all my life. But and pastoring the church now and just being an assistant pastor, didn't really know each other. So we spent about a year and a half just trying to get to know each other, understanding, that Curtis isn't going to leave me if something like happens to me, or vice versa. And it was good doing that, just stopping, not even bringing our ministries together at this point, just as pastors and priests coming together and sharing in unity and oneness. We did that until we got tired of looking at each other, honestly. Because after a year and a half of not doing anything, and then we said, we got to do something for the community. We got to do something for the neighborhood. And we all decided there's a park in our community. The park has broken backboards. Kids play basketball, broken backboards. It's a park. The gates are all broken. It's overgrown with weeds. But the kids are still out there with a broken backboard shooting hoops. And so we decided that we would clean the park. We would buy some food and barbecue some hot dogs and hamburgers and just go out. And we said, people are going to ask us, why are we doing this? So we got to come up with some reason why. And our reason was because we care. And that's what our mantra was, because we care, we're coming into the neighborhood. And people were amazed. Just that 5 churches decided to come together to do something in the community. And it shouldn't be that way. That people are amazed that the faith community wants to get engaged in the community. And so while I'm out there, I'm younger still. And so while they're cleaning up, there's kids on the basketball court, so I'm going out to play basketball. And just while I'm playing basketball with these 12, 13, 15-year-olds, I'm elbowing them and saying, hey, man, don't you see we're out here cleaning? Why don't you pick up a shovel and help us? Why don't you, take up a lawnmower and mow some grass with us? Just engaging and having conversation, because, 20 years ago, that was me on the basketball court doing those things. And now I'm the literally outsider, because I live in Gary, but I don't live in that neighborhood. So now I'm an outsider, even though I grew up in the neighborhood. All the people I grew up with, some are still there, but this new generation, I don't know. But they were respectful. They went and picked up rakes after I beat them playing basketball, by the way. They went and just did, because people just want to know that somebody cares about them. And if you talk to somebody, we talk to those young men and those young ladies on the basketball court, they do anything for you. But you got to get to know them. And that's what we did. And so we began, like I said, God gave us this crazy vision. I shared it with all the churches. And then just even church life happens. And so God shared with us to buy up the property around us. We did that on faith. We stepped out on faith, brought the property, and we started a community. We call it an urban farm. We started with 3 raised beds. We grew a lot of food in year number 1. In year number 2, we tore all that up. We had 8 12 by 12 raised beds. We grew a lot of food. Year number 3, I decided to go and learn how to grow, because I'm not a farmer, but I grew up in the city. Here is the closest I've come to growing any food is in the backyard. We play baseball, and my brothers and sisters and I, and we'd hit the ball into my neighbor. She was from the south, so she had a garden in her yard. We'd hit the ball in her garden, and I'd go and retrieve the ball, and she would say, get your you-know-what out of my garden. So that's the closest I came to growing anything and so I knew nothing about it. But God told us there's going to be a famine in the land, and we need to know where our food comes from. And that's the reason we started growing food. And if you go there now, we got about 5 parcels that we've turned into a community farm, a community urban farm. We have about 15 goats, 12 ducks, and 65 chickens. It looks a little weird as you come around the corner. One lady thought the goats were horses. She stopped me. "What are you doing with those horses?" I said, "No, those are not horses. Those are goats." But it just opens up, and people. It literally for us helps us to share the good news of Jesus Christ and what God has called us to do. Because we have these wind tunnels. We have 3 of them. We have 4 of them. And they look like, when we first started them, they look like outer space stuff. So people are like, "Are you all building rocket ships? Where y'all going?" I was like, "No." So we have to, so it's a really good way to just, one, break ice with people who come to you and share information. But then what we've also discovered is a good way for us to share the gospel and the good news of Jesus Christ. We are literally being the light of the world and the salt of the earth. And so we've eliminated, there were 2 abandoned houses. Both of them are gone where we grow space. And what God shared with me is, from the ground, everything comes from the ground, right? So if you're going to build a building, it comes from the ground. If the cow's going to eat, they eat from the ground. And so everything that's grown is grown from the ground. And if you don't do anything, weeds are going to grow. And so part of what we were dealing with were overgrown weeds and the like. And so recently, we just got, 2 weeks ago, we just finished on another 5 parcels. We created an urban pollinator garden. And so we have 5 beehives where we get honey and sell honey. And part of this for us, our vision is micro enterprise, and to teach people about micro enterprise. So if you go and look up Gary, and you look up the Emerson neighborhood of Gary, another test. What's the median income of the Emerson neighborhood of Gary? Anybody? Median household income. 14. Anybody else? You're close. 12. $12,000. And so if we don't do something to change, if the church doesn't, and I came in here, I was amazed because like your space, this probably is, our church is probably this size. So we don't have a lot of people, but we're dedicated. God has called us, and we're dedicated to what God has called us to do. And so we just completed an urban, what we're going to call an environmental learning center, so that folks can learn. I think there's this we've lost balance with a lot of things in life, with each other, but we've also lost balance with creation and with the environment. And so we want to create this place. We've created it where birds, bees, butterflies can come, and people can be there, and they all sort of operate in this one space together without somebody trying to kill a bee or, something like that happening. And so that's our latest project. As Pastor mentioned, Creation Care deals with solar panels. We got solar panels about 7 years ago when we're the first church in Gary to have solar panels on our roof, because we believe one, it saves us money. So the first year we didn't have a bill. Our bill was $0. But since we've added on to what we do in ministry, we now see a bill. But it's a great way to reduce our carbon footprint. We really believe that. And so those are the things that we're doing, Progressive Community Church, doing to rebuild our community and our neighborhood. One of the next projects we have, I told you about all the blight that we have, overgrown weeds, is to build some tiny homes. Is our plan to build at least one before the end of this year as a pilot, so people can see, as most people are visual people, so they can see exactly what it is that we're talking about when we talk about tiny homes. And we want to build a tiny home village for seniors. We want to build a tiny home village for those whose parents who may be in a foster system or just in the system, who at 18 years old, they after they graduate from high school, they don't really have any place to go. And we want to be able to build something so that they have somewhere to go. And a 400 square foot house would probably be a really good thing. And what we want to do is continue to teach them. I want to teach financial literacy. But all of this is the ability to have access. And a lot of what we miss in Gary is the ability to have access. So I sit on the board of Methodist Hospitals, which is the hospital in Gary. And I see now why God brought us to food, because food is life. And access to, because we sit not only in the midst of a blighted community, we sit in the midst, we probably have 22 food desert tracts in Gary or more. And our church is in the middle of one of those food deserts. And so I now see the correlation between food and health. A lot of African Americans suffer from heart disease, diabetes, and the like. All of those are treatable diseases, and one of the main impacts of that is the food that is eaten. And so we don't have a Whole Foods in Gary. If you don't have transportation, it's tough to get outside of Gary to go in and to get fresh, local, affordable food. So one of our goals is that we teach people how to grow. If you want to learn how to grow, you can come to the farm and we'll help you learn how to grow. That's how how important we believe this is, that we can help change health outcomes, life outcomes, all through food. And that's another one of the things that we're looking to do. I can go on and on and on. I'll stop right there and ask if have Pastor Bob come and share. Thank you.
Joe, you want to come up here and join us? Now, there's a couple of things we just want to talk, and I don't know where he is. Dan's all the way at the back. But we want to give you a chance to ask any questions of Curtis about what he's doing with his ministry or what he's experienced as an African-American pastor and the kinds of things he's gone through. Just ask him any questions. He's an open book. But one question some of you might have, maybe, some of you might be thinking, this sounds amazing. How can we encourage Pastor Whitaker to do the work he's doing? So I'll just give you a little bit of information that I've never released publicly yet, but I see a couple of people here who are part of the missions committee. We're going to take a field trip to Gary, Indiana. It will probably be in October, in which we're going to look at what they're doing in Gary and ask the question about whether or not there's ways in which we can assist to do the work that we cannot do, that Pastor Whitaker can do. So you'll hear more about that as we develop a potential vision for being partners in ministry with them. We don't know where it's going to go. We're not promising an outcome, but we are thinking about it. So if that was one of the questions you might have had, there's an answer to one of your questions. Joel, do you have anything you'd like to ask? Go right ahead.
Why do you start?
Okay, all right. So, Curtis, tell me, what was it like to go back to a town that was your town and to enter a town that you basically did not know?
That's a great question. Like I said, I didn't want to go back just because I was at the time living a good life. And it was hard. It's hard seeing, I do still have friends there. It's hard seeing just things deteriorate and to the level that it had deteriorated. It was strange because now I've been living sort of a different community, different lifestyle, and so yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah. You've told me a number of different stories. I want to ask you about one and let you tell them this story. So your experience has not all been negative when it comes to interracial relationships. And one of the people that was really important in your life was Mr. B. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, Mr. Bodner, Jim Bodner. So Mr. Bodner stayed, I stayed at 714 Kentucky Street. He stayed at 725 Kentucky Street, a couple of doors down and over from us. A lot of white flight in the 70s and 80s from Gary. And Mr. B made a determination that he was going to stay. And Mr. Bodner just looked at us like we were his own kids. Like, he gave us a fin. I never knew what a fin was until I met Mr. B. Fin is $5 bill. So he gave us a fin for making good grades. So that was one of the motivations for making good grades. We get $5. He'd help. He'd let us hold his bag where he cut the grass. He said, "Turn your face away. I'm putting these in there, and you don't want to get that in your eyes." And so he just was there. He let us shovel the snow. And with snow shoveling, whoever got there first was the one he paid. So all the kids on the block wanted to shovel Mr. B's snow. But he was just an amazing man. When I was in college, he worked as a supervisor at the water company and got me an internship at the water company with him. At the time, I didn't know it, but the water company, they go by last name. So, what's your name, kid? Curtis. And the only Curtis there was a white guy and they all started laughing. I'm like, what are they laughing about? And then they found Curtis and said, "Curtis, is this your kid?" And I said, "Oh, no, my last name's Whitaker." And he's like, "Wait a minute, no Whitakers work here. How did you get this?" And I told him who my neighbor was, and they, "Oh, okay, Mr. B." And so, yeah, Mr. B was a really, really influential in my life and my family's life. Just, he just showed grace. Yeah. He passed away about 3 or 4 years ago. We went and spoke at his funeral, and just an amazing man.
Yeah. Thanks. Joe?
So thanks a lot for sharing your story. It's really, really moving, and I think we have so much to learn. And I don't know about you all, but it just makes me feel so privileged. Just things that we just take for granted living in Bloomington. I guess my question for you is, this is a kind of a race-related question, but what do you wish that white Christians would know? What do you wish that white Christians know about your experience as an African American Christian that perhaps is not very obvious to them?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I was in college. I was we road trip when you're in college. I was in fraternity. We go road tripping. So me and my fraternity brothers get on the road. We go into St. Louis. My dad's from St. Louis, so all of my dad's family still lives there. It was 8, 9 of us. Now, you ask my dad how many brothers and sisters he had, he'd tell you 24. So I knew about 12 of them. And so we're in St. Louis. It's late at night. My grandmother lives in a nice part of, it's not really in St. Louis, it's outside, but it's a nice neighborhood, mixed neighborhood. I'm driving in my Impala at that time, 78 Impala, 4-door, blue, red, purple, it's all kind of colors. I just, college kid. And I noticed the police behind me. And we hadn't done anything wrong, but just the sense of having the police behind you, you get scared. And so at that point, you got your seatbelt on, you make sure when you turn the corner, you put your blinkers on. When you get to a stop sign, you no longer do the New York stop, right? You got to you got to really stop at the stop sign. So I'm conscious, very aware of that. I do all of those things and still get pulled over. And the cop asked and said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to my grandmother's house." And literally, I started not to stop. I started to just keep going, make it to my grandmother's house, and just get out at my grandmother's house. But I stopped. "Where are you going?" "Going to my grandmother's house." "Your grandmother live in this neighborhood?" "Yeah, my grandmother lives in it." I knew how to get to my grandmother's house, but I didn't know her address. I didn't know any of that kind of stuff. I said, "Yeah, she lives right around the corner from here." One of the most scariest moments in my life, because I didn't know, it was 1990-something. I didn't know. It's dark. It's like 10 o'clock at night. It's dark. Not a whole lot of lights outside. And thankfully didn't get a ticket, and because we didn't do anything, but just the mere fact that we got pulled over for nothing was very scary. And I just went in and just stayed in for the rest of the night. Just didn't feel like, going back out or doing anything. And so experiences are real. This is a real experience. I could tell you probably 3 months ago, I was on the campus of Indiana University, IUN, IU Northwest. I was with Professor Frank Nowicki. He's a professor here. And we're walking, leaving the university, and as we're walking, he turns around and says, "Hey, did you notice that there was a police officer there and that they wouldn't move until," I said, "I noticed them much sooner than you noticed them, because that's my context. I have to be aware and I have to be alert." I noticed that they stopped to see not what you were doing. They stopped to see what I was doing, because I often dress in a suit and tie, but more likely than not nowadays you'll see me in a jogging suit, and I look younger than I really am. And so he saw it. It's like, oh, wow, I noticed something, but I didn't really understand what was happening. So I said, yeah, that is what was going on. That was what was taking place. They didn't know if I was with you, if I wasn't with you, what was going on. And so they really had concern. And he said, I see it now. I see, this is one moment that helps me see and understand what you go through. And I said, well, I'm glad that you're able to see it. And so these experiences are real. In certain contexts, it's like we're living in two Americas. One where I can talk what we call Ebonics. I can go to the hood and we can chop it up. And, folks in the hood know what I'm talking about. But then I have to go to Arthur Anderson, and I can't do that at Arthur Anderson because there's an expectation that I'm a certain way. And really, for me, one of the beautiful things about even my own business is I can just be me. I don't have to try to, put on something just to fit into a place. I can just be me. Yeah.
Thank you.
So anybody, Dan, I'll go right to you if you put your hand up, but until he gets there, can you tell them the story about the pastors that got together for a conference in Gary and that connection you made with the white pastor and the way in which that unfolded for you?
Yeah, so I'm part of a Baptist Ministers Conference of Gary and vicinity in Gary. And Pastor Todd Benkert is his name. Pastor Todd came. He's a pastor of a Baptist church, but we never had any. It's all black men. And Pastor Todd shows up, and it was a little weird at first. But, you open it up, you accept people. And something happened. I don't remember what event triggered our discussion, because in the conference, then if something happens like Trayvon Martin, and it might have been Trayvon Martin's death, we then in the conference have discussion about it. We talk about it openly, and Pastor Benkert couldn't understand. It's like, but and we're like, but the kid didn't do anything wrong. And now, you know, there'll be media that says the kid, you'll see it. You'll start seeing, okay, this kid was this. He was having trouble in school. You know, you'll start seeing the media. And so he posted something, and I responded to it because I thought, man, that's very insensitive, what you posted about this. And to his credit, we were able to have a dialogue on Facebook. This dialogue that led to us coming together to host similar sessions like this, conversation, listening sessions in communities, because the light bulb came on for him. And I said, and he's like, what do I do? I was like, now you can go into your own community and share what you know now that you have experienced, and now that you see that it's a lot more than just surface things. You can go and share what we've shared and what you've learned from your conversations with me, and your conversations with us around why we feel the way we feel when things like this take place. And so Pastor Todd was really instrumental in making that happen.
Thanks. Sean?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, Sean Chambers, thanks a lot for coming tonight. Really appreciate you sharing. I was just a little touched when you talked about you coming from Gary to Bloomington and that kind of culture shock. And I just wondered if you could just, it's not a direct question, just a little bit more of a sharing of the types of things you experienced, not only just feeling it sounded like you somewhat felt out of place, maybe, if I can say it that way, and how you kind of walk through that in your 5 years and adapting.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, really felt out of, so context. We worked, so, you know, I didn't come from a rich family. You know, my dad, we worked, so rarely did we, on working every day in the summer, I go from Michigan to Illinois on a route at least 3 times a day, right? And so I would interact with people, but those people I'm interacting with, I'm thanking them, like, man, you're like blessing us by saving this stuff for us. So I'm looking at them through a different lens and differently. And so I've interacted with people, but I'm a kid, they're adults, and so it's a little different. So when I come to Bloomington, it was just this, it was scary. I mean, I literally was scared just because we never went on vacations a lot, never really been away from home. So I thought about a similar question, and I was like, man, recently when somebody else asked me something, I was like, man, I never even went to Chicago, and I was 30 minutes away, right? I mean, I was like literally like we never traveled to Indianapolis except we were in high school, in grade school. That was the trip. You come to the Capitol. Other than that, as a family, we didn't really travel or get out of our own environment like that. And so then to come here, one, the campus is huge, right? It's just like a city within a city. And then just, 30, 35,000 people. And less than, I don't know what the numbers are now, but back then it was less than like 2% of them are African American. And that's different, especially coming from my context where I'm coming from 95% or higher are African American. And it's easier then to relate to folks who look like you. And so that just made it scary. The academics are the same. So I didn't, aside from that experience I had with the dean of the math department, I didn't have any other negative experience. I had one. We were in, it wasn't here. We were road tripping. We went to, I don't know where we were coming from, but it was somewhere near Purdue, and my car stopped, and it's like 5 of us in the car, and we get to a gas station, and these white guys call us monkeys. And now we're in their hood, right? And but we're teenagers still, like 18, 19, 20, and it's like, what in the world do we do? Our cars stopped, and we got no place to go, and just luckily the car started up and we could get the heck out of wherever we were. And somewhere between Indianapolis and West Lafayette, Rensselaer, somewhere like that. But just those experiences gives you, makes you afraid. It does. And so I was really afraid. One, because like I said, I never really went anywhere outside of Gary. And then to come here and just like, man, you just get lost and just get this sense of feeling of, you hear about Martinsville, right? You don't go through there at night. If you're black, don't do it. And so you hear about stories of, and it just heightens that sense of, you better be in football. They say keep your head on a swivel. You got to keep your head on a swivel.
So what I'm wondering now is, are there things that would have made you feel that the people who live here in this community could have done to alleviate some of that or make you feel more welcome?
I don't know if it wasn't a feeling of welcome. It's just I just had never been outside of my community. And so I wouldn't even know people in the community because on college you stay within the college. So you don't really until, like I stayed in the dorms my freshman year, but then after that I was, living outside. But I rarely met anybody outside of campus life. So I don't know if the community could do anything different, because most students probably would never interact unless they come to church. And I joined a church when I got here. So unless you do that, and then I coached actually 1 year at one of the local there were two schools, middle schools. There was a man named Mr. Joe Body, and Joe was a coach, and we went to church together, and he let me be his assistant. Joe was an African American basketball coach, and he let me assist with him 1 year. So aside from that, because that honestly was a way for me to feel part of community by going to church. And so I joined the church to do that.
Hi, my name is Phoebe Wahungu, and I just want to add, my question is an extension of what she just asked. So, how about the professors? What did they have done to make your life, for you to feel like you're welcome, at least at the classroom level?
That's a great question. What could professors have done to make you feel? So as a freshman, you come in, there are 300 students in a class, right? They don't know students in the classroom unless you go. I would go if I needed some help. I would go, but most students wouldn't go see a professor. Most students would. So I'm sure there is something professors can do, but those probably happen as you may come to a. So that you can look and see, okay, is the kid doing well or not doing well? That may be an indication. Okay, is the grades good? So I would make good grades, so you would never know, just because I was just I just made good grades. So unless I came to you and shared that, it would be difficult to pick up on that. But just understand that you may have students in your classroom who are maybe struggling in that way. Would be one of the things, just to understand. Some kids may be like me that never got outside of that environment, and for them to come into this environment could be a struggle. So I just say that's probably one of the ways, just to understand that could be happening, even if a kid may be making, like me, good grades. Yeah.
We're going to get you a mic.
So I'm just thinking, did you meet other students who had the same experience like you? And just another question, I think you can answer both of them if possible. So I'm thinking of the fact that you had not been out of your your community. So you're coming to IU, it's a big community, a big campus. I'm thinking, so if you had an issue, or did you ever encounter other students who are in your kind of situation who could not even approach a professor, for example, if they had an assignment that was due and probably they didn't do it on time and now they can't do it? Did you guys even have the courage to go to a professor and say, look, I was supposed to turn in this assignment yesterday, and whatever reason you didn't do it, can I have an extension? Did you even have the guts to do that? Or did they have?
Yeah,
Given
so
that you are a good student?
great question. So I was fortunate enough to come to IU on the groups program. And so I came in the summer before the masses came, right? And so I got a little bit, 6-week head start that sort of helped. So on groups as first generation students. And so a lot of the first generation students were African American. So I was able to, meet some people, meet some friends. One of the professors, you asked a great question, was Dr. James Mumford. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Dr. James Mumford, but he was over the African American choral ensemble for a long time here at Indiana University. I sang with Dr. James Mumford in the choral ensemble. Dr. James Mumford was like a father to me. So if I had anybody that I needed to ask questions to, it would probably be, we called him Doc, it would probably be Doc. That, or he had this great way to sense if something was wrong with you, even if you didn't say it, just because he really got to know all of his students. He has this amazing way to do that. And so, and then Miss Tinsley, Rochelle Tinsley, was in the business school. She was specifically there for minority students and to help them if they were having issues and troubles in the business school. And so those two really helped me. But I would say they took time. Doc took time with all of his students. I mean, I don't know how he did it, but like he could tell you stories about every in his 80 kids in his class. He could tell you stories about each of them, and so he took time to understand the person, and that helped. That helped. Yeah, that helped.
Hi. I want to know about all those abandoned homes in your church neighborhood. Is there any, like a plan or a hope that they could be reoccupied with families again? Would that build up the community there?
Any land that can be reoccupied?
I thought there were homes.
Houses, got you. So that's interesting because we purchased a number of things. I said our church, we purchased a bunch of property around us. Some of them are, I'll give you my own example. When we moved back, finally moved back, we moved into a condo after spending 6 months in a hotel. And then a realtor, I didn't want to move, but my wife wanted to move. And so we found a realtor was still looking for a house for us, and she found one. I didn't ask her to find it, but she found it anyway. And, it had a tennis court. It has a tennis court on it. It has a swimming pool. It has a pool house, all that stuff. But it was a, what do you call that? It was a foreclosed house. And so it had been sitting for a while. And so I told the realtor, I don't want this house. And then she called my wife. We're in the house. And so because it had sat so long, the people, whoever came in and they cut the wires to the house right at the electrical box, which means that you got to rewire the whole house. And the roof had caved in because it's like lights or whatever, glass in the roof. They had caved in, so there's a mold growing. So you don't know what you get when I say that to say, we spent a lot of money on that house. Because you don't know what you are going to get when you go behind a wall. And so the same is true of these blighted houses. Some have been blighted 20 years. They're just sitting there. And so it might make more sense to knock the house down and build a new house than to put $40,000, $50,000 into this house. So on a case-by-case basis. So what we've decided to do is it's not worth, the effort. And so we partner with the city, and the city has demolished a number of the houses for us through a program that they had with the state, just because we think it might make more sense to do that. But on a case-by-case, we now make that determination. So we have two houses. One we're going to rehab, and the other one, they're telling us it's so much mold in the house that we should probably either gut the whole house because the roof and water has been seeping in, gut the whole thing, or tear it down. It's really what they told us, to tear it down. And somebody else was like, oh, you ain't got to tear it down. Just gut it all. It's like whatever it's going to be a project. So, and we don't have all of the financial resources as we're in a community of median income $12,000. So most of the members of the church come from the community or the neighborhood. And so we don't have all of the financial resources to make that a reality.
We try to keep these at about an hour, but Bill, you got a question back there?
Can you just tell us more about the church?
Yeah, Progressive Community Church, 75 years young. I'm the third pastor of the church. Grew up in the church, so we hear from God, and we're doers. I'll say that. We believe in what God has called us to do, to go forth and share the good news of the gospel. We believe what we're doing is that work. We believe, we get all kinds of people now that come to the farm. Some still learning about the farm, but we believe as they come, we can share the good news of the gospel with them as they come. We're not a large church. Pre-COVID, we probably had 70 people come to church, right? Post-COVID, we get 15 people that come to church. We got a lot of people who watch us online, but who actually now, in this COVID environment, come probably 15 to 20 on a Sunday now. Like I said, we're in the middle of a blighted neighborhood community. The age has changed now that, pre-COVID to post-COVID. We don't have a lot of young people that attend church anymore because family's not coming. But we're starting, ironically, on second Sunday in October, we're going to start a 4-H program through our church for members of the community. So anybody's welcome to come. You don't have to be a member of our church to come to the 4-H or to come and get food or to come and work with us. That's one of the things that we found, that because we're a church, that some people won't even come to the farm because they think it's just for those church people. And we're totally not like that. So I get people, like, you're more than welcome to come and share with us in any way, and you don't have to belong to the church, And we have two guys who are two really good volunteers who come and work with us, and they're not members of our church. They're one of the members' neighbors. They're her neighbors, and they come every day, faithful. And I said, they may not be church member faithful, but, they're faithful to do this ministry. And so everything we do, we look at as ministry. And the ways that we can share and show the love of Jesus Christ, because that's what we believe it's about. People don't, this is what somebody once said, people don't care how much you know till you, they know how much you care, and I believe that.
We'll make Audra the last one.
Hi, Curtis. I'm Audra. I don't really have so much a question as some observations, which I super appreciate you sharing your story. And when I see you telling your story, I hear of life that wasn't very easy growing up, some hardships. But what I see through that is how you've taken that hardships and really come to appreciate who it's made you to be. And I love that, about your story, is that you've really, clung to your history and said, hey, this is who I am today, and now I'm giving back to my community. And my other observation of your story, throughout it, I over and over again heard you finding common ground with other people, whether it was on the basketball court or in the garden or wherever you are. And I think that is such a great role model, wherever you are, to find that common ground. And I'm super excited, and hopefully that can be modeled for other people, to find that common ground and hear their stories, and for us to hear your story. So I really appreciate you coming, Curtis.
Thank you. I would share, we talked some about that earlier. So I went to CTS. I don't know if many of you know Chicago Theological Seminary, but it is one of the most liberal seminaries in America. I did not know that when I went. All I wanted to do was find a place that I didn't have to pass the MCAT. So I was tired of taking standardized tests. And so I signed up to go there, not understanding what I had signed up for. But when I got there, I told you life happened. When in the middle of seminary, life happened. And people who I disagree with showed me love, right? I disagree with them on a whole lot of theological things, but, love is something that, in the moment when you're at a place and you're hurting, and you won't care where that expression of love is going to come from. And I learned that, lesson while I was there. We talked about that earlier. And I don't know if I would have learned it if I would have took the MCAT.
Yeah, I'll give you a chance, Joe. You're good? All right. Well, let's thank Curtis again, and he'll hang out and talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't keep him too long, because he's driving straight home to Gary tonight, and that's another 4 hours. But you can talk to him. He'll talk to you. He's a wonderful guy. So thanks again. Thanks for coming.